Hi, I'm Louie Gohmert. I represent the 1st District of Texas, which encompasses over 12 counties, stretching nearly 120 miles down the eastern Texas border with something called Louisiana, the state. Well, while serving my 7th term in Congress, I've had the great opportunity to work with numerous House committees and subcommittees, and it's my honor right now to be serving as Vice Chair of the House Committee on Natural Resources, as well as Vice Chair of the Subcommittee on Crime, Terrorism, and Homeland Security. Now, coming from the beautiful woods of East Texas, I take this responsibility in Congress very, very seriously. Our stewardship of our precious natural resources is a critical necessity, not only to East Texas, but to a whole nation. And I know how vital it is to get our overly burdensome and lethargic federal government out of the way, which will allow the natural ingenuity of Americans to take leadership and ownership of those resources. Whether it's confronting issues in forestry, contributing America's renewed leadership in global energy production, coming up with new and inventive ways to combat invasive species, or assisting with the conservation of endangered species throughout the world, I've learned that East Texas and America work best when we're unencumbered by redundant and needless regulations and self-important bureaucrats. It's this commitment that's led me to work with our other members of the Western Caucus. We're reforming outdated legislation like the Endangered Species Act, which has done far more to harm our productivity than it has in even saving less than perhaps 1% of the species we're supposed to be helping because they're endangered. The Save America's Vulnerable Endangered Species Act, the SAVES Act, would amend the Endangered Species Act of 1973 to provide that non-native species in the United States shall not be treated as endangered species or threatened species for purposes of the Endangered Species Act. At the time the ESA, Endangered Species Act, was originally enacted, inclusion of non-native species was well-intentioned. But as incipient international regulatory bodies, such as the Convention on International Trade and Endangered Species Act, or CITES, has sought to encourage international protections, well, they've lacked political capital and they've actually done harm. However, like many other aspects of the ESA, the inclusion of non-native species is outdated, overly burdensome, and in fact works against the very intent of the Endangered Species Act. Instead of promoting conservation of these international species, this regulation has been used in outrageous ways to try to federally take over private land of owners who've raised thousands of those specific species that are endangered or even extinct in other places. In fact, the ESA has been used to try to punish Americans who have saved foreign endangered species, which has therefore done grave harm to increasing the herds of non-native species. Now, without those American conservationists that the endangered species seeks to punish, some of those non-native species would already be extinct today. The unfortunate reality of the Endangered Species Act is that it continuously burdens commerce in various industries. For instance, a few years ago, conservationists in Texas noted the impending extinction of the African scimitar-horned oryx. In order to save these species, these Texas saviors brought the oryx to grasslands there in Texas in responsible captive breeding programs. Within a few years, they released thousands of non-native oryx back, including in their natural native habitat in Africa. However, such practices, due to the oryx inclusion in the Convention on International Trade and Endangered Species, or the CITES, it became technically illegal. To put that in perspective, conservationists who were intent on saving an endangered species were prevented from doing so by the Endangered Species Act itself. That's an outrageous result from a bureaucratic nightmare. The SAVES Act that we are pushing now will eradicate unnecessary, outdated, and redundant regulatory authority over interstate movement of non-native endangered species by removing them from the listing authority of the Endangered Species Act. This bill is sure to enhance conservation and reduce the burden these duplicative regulations have on the industry. Protecting the country's endangered species is crucial. However, it's prudent to eliminate any type of redundant government regulatory authority. When these types of duplicative rules are eradicated, rare species can truly thrive, and that's when we put our best conservation foot forward. And that's why I'm here today, thanking you for caring.